My name's Marc Edwards and I write psychological thrillers for Thomas & Mercer. They're books in which scary things happen to ordinary people. I started out self-publishing in 2011 and then in 2013 I was signed to Thomas & Mercer, and now I've published 8 books for Thomas & Mercer, sold 2 million books and had 7 #1 bestsellers. The marketing support that I get from Amazon is fantastic, so whenever I have a new novel out, people know that it's out there and my readers can find it very easily. I constantly receive emails and messages from readers. They say really nice things. For example, they hadn't read a book for years, or they'd gone off reading and then they'd read one of my books and it had reinvigorated their love of reading. It's really nice to receive messages like that. Amazon are really great at consulting the author, letting me know what's going on, asking questions. It feels like a partnership. It feels like we're working together to further my career and sell as many books as possible. One of the most exciting things when Follow You Home, my 3rd book, hit the top 10 in the USA, and it sold 500,000 copies, and it was fantastic. It was a life-changing amount of books that were sold. Another highlight was when The Retreat hit #1 in the bestseller charts on its first day of release. Ever since I was a kid listening to the top 40, I've always wanted to be able to say that I'd gone straight in at #1, and I achieved it when that happened.
You are joining with audiences from across the globe to enjoy Harrogate International Festival's series of online events, streamed straight from our home to yours. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the Red Hot Chilli writers presenting Career Criminals as part of the Theakston Old Peculiar Crime Writing Festival, presented by Thomas & Mercer. We promise you've got the best seats in the house.
Welcome one and all to the Career Criminals panel at Theakston's Old Peculiar Crime Writing Festival, presented by Thomas & Mercer. We are Vaseem and Abir Mukherjee, crime authors and hosts of the Red Hot Chilli Writers podcast, a podcast that takes a culturally nuanced look at the creative arts, particularly crime writing. That's just a fancy way of saying that we're both British Asian writers and not afraid of using our backgrounds to give you a different perspective on things. Be warned.
Today we're chatting to 4 brilliant authors from the Thomas & Mercer publishing stable, and if they were horses, they'd all win the Grand National. Who writes this? It must be Vass. To us, as part of this year's Digital Theakston's Harrogate International Festivals weekend, we have Marc Edwards, Susi Holliday, Claire McGowan and Dreda Mitchell. On behalf of the Harrogate Festival and the Red Hot Chilli Writers, welcome. Shall we start with some introductions, Vass? What do you think?
Yeah, let's go. Let's find out a little bit more about these guys.
Susi Holliday grew up near Edinburgh and worked in the pharmaceutical industry for many years before she started writing. She's the author of 7 crime novels, 5 of them written as SJI Holliday. Her most recent, Violet, explores a toxic female friendship that unfolds on the Trans-Siberian Express. And her upcoming novel, the one we're here to talk about, The Last Resort, is a mashup of Agatha Christie and Black Mirror. She loves to travel and now combines her trips around the world with book research, possibly for tax reasons. Welcome, Susi. Just moving on, Claire McGowan is the author of 2 best-selling thrillers, What You Did and The Other Wife, as well as the Paula Maguire crime series. She also writes women's fiction as Eva Woods. Her new book, The Push, is out later this year. Welcome, Claire.
Hi.
And the other 2 guests that we have, so Dreda, is it Dreda or Dreda?
It's an Irish, when I say it's an Irish name, people get it, it's Dreda, so a long vowel E sound in the middle, Dreda.
Okay. I knew that, Dreda, I knew that.
Of course you did.
So Dreda Mitchell is a best-selling author and award-winning author, broadcaster, journalist and campaigner who grew up, like me, in East London. Dreda's writing career started on a creative writing course out at Soho's, this always makes me laugh, Soho's Groucho Club, where she began writing her debut novel, Running Hot. She's since written 12 other novels, many with her writing partner, Tony Mason, including their psychological international bestseller, Spare Room. In 2005, she won the CWA John Creasy Dagger, the first time a Black British writer scooped the award. And last but not least, we have Marc Edwards, who is originally from Hastings, but now lives in Wolverhampton for his sins. He's the author of 10 psychological thrillers, including The Magpies and Here to Stay, and 6 books co-written with Louise Voss. His most recent book is The House Guest, about a house-sitting gig in New York that goes scarily wrong. And Marc has sold about a gazillion books. And before we began this podcast, he was just telling us about 3 people he murdered last week.
We hate Marc with all his details. Anyway, and his Wolverhampton mansion. Look at you. Which wing are you in today, Marc?
Which wing? Oh, the West Wing. I've gone for the Walter White look now, to kind of go with the murders. So I'm going to keep saying things like "I am the danger" and "I'm the man who knocks." But it doesn't sound very good in my voice, does it?
No, you need your hat. You're missing your Walter White.
I know. I've lost the hat. I left it in the desert.
It's in the East Wing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, welcome to all of you. It's an absolute joy to have you all on. Should we dive straight in, Vas? What do you think?
Yeah, let's find out a bit about their latest books. The must-have reads that our listeners absolutely must rush out and buy right now, or at least as soon as we have stopped waffling on. Could each of you give us a little elevator pitch about your latest?
Who should we start with? Should we start with Claire, because she's drinking, so she's
yeah
prepared. So
is it tea or is it whiskey? Who knows? I'll talk about my new one, which actually isn't out until November, but I'm quite excited about it. It's about an antenatal group, and I don't have any kids myself, but from what I understand, those are often hotbeds of rivalry and kind of competitiveness. A lot of my books are sort of about middle-class competitiveness, which is something that really interests me. So it's about a group of 6 couples and their instructor. Someone gets murdered at the party at the end of it. We don't know who it is for a while. One of them. It's set here in South London, which is where I live, around the kind of Crystal Palace, Beckenham sort of area.
So one of the couples in the NCT classes, one of them is murdered.
Somebody is murdered, yeah. Somebody is murdered, yeah.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
But you don't know who it is until about halfway through, and then you find out why. So that's why it's called the push. So someone gets pushed off a balcony.
Oh, wow.
Oh, whoa.
I think Marc has also done a book about someone getting pushed off a balcony.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Do not. If we ever go to either of their homes, don't go near a balcony.
Well, I don't have a balcony, so you're safe. You're safe.
So you know that this is going to be coined as a new phrase, balcony noir.
Yeah.
I mean, Marc, was your book where somebody was pushed off a balcony, was that in the UK?
Yeah, it was also in South London.
South London. Was it in Beckenham?
Yeah.
Mine is also in Beckenham. I accidentally copied you there.
Okay, so it's Beckenham balcony. What? Yeah.
Wasn't there a chap who tried to throw some kid off was it the British Museum or the Tate Museum?
The Tate.
Yeah. Oh God.
Anyway, let's move swift. Come on, Susie, tell us a wee bit about your new book.
So my new book is The Last Resort, which is out at the end of the year. And as you mentioned, it's a bit of a mashup of Agatha Christie and Black Mirror. So basically it involves an island, a bunch of horrible people, and for the Black Mirror part, there's a new technology there that they don't know that they're there to test.
Oh man, that sounds pretty cool. So it's like a deserted small island. What is it, off the coast of Ireland, or is it a tropical island?
It's actually the Scilly Isles. It's one of the Scilly Isles.
I'm going there next week.
Are you? Oh,
yeah, wow. Hopefully. I'll have to watch out.
Spoiler. Be writing that book as well.
I've also done a Dodgy Island book.
So Susie, is this in the tradition of 10 Little, I've forgotten what the current...
Indians.
And Then There Were None.
There were none.
Then there were none. Yeah, which was adapted by the... Wasn't it adapted by the BBC again last year?
Yeah.
It was a couple of years ago, yeah.
Adaptation. So I presume one by one these individuals on your island start to get knocked off.
Kind of, not quite like that, but it's basically that it's they all arrive thinking that they're there for some sort of luxury retreat type setup. and then it all turns out quite quickly that it's not going to be luxury, and they're not all going to go home.
You know what this sounds like to me? This sounds like the timeshare industry. I was going
to say, it sounds like this interview. You all came on here thinking one of you isn't going home. Dreda, tell us about your new one.
Do you know what? I'm in a kind of a strange situation in that I've just signed up to Thomas and Mercer, so I'm still trying to work out what my books actually are. So I'll talk about that a bit later. So I thought to myself, I'm going to talk about Spare Room. And Spare Room is a domestic noir, and it starts off with an advert in a newspaper, and all it says is beautiful room to let to single person. And our protagonist, Lisa, slightly troubled, jumps at the chance to rent a room in this gorgeous house. The landlord and lady, they're living there. They seem welcoming and very kind. All sounds great. And then she finds a suicide note hidden in her room. But the landlord and lady actually say that she's the first tenant there. And she's compelled, because she's got her own demons, to try and find out actually what happened. But as she starts to try and find out, the four walls of this house start closing in on her because it doesn't want to let out its secrets. And you know what? Lisa's going to find out that home is actually where the nightmare is.
I love that. I love that.
Mind you, when you said Spare Room, I'm sorry, but the first thing that popped into my head was spare ribs.
Really?
I'm sorry. I apologise for Vaseem. Sometimes on time.
Do you mean spare rib as in spare rib, or do you mean spare rib as in the old feminist magazine that used to be?
No, very much. I was feeling peckish. I haven't had my breakfast yet, Dreda.
Dreda, can I just say, that sounds like it is made for TV. That I can just picture that being a huge series.
Oh, okay. I can't say any more about that bit. But I'm smiling, let's just say.
That is good news. Now,
we'll see. Interesting industry. We'll see. Yeah.
Well, good luck with that. And I think there's a gentleman sitting in Wolverhampton that we haven't gone to yet. Mr. Walter White, tell us about your new one.
Well, it's not set in Wolverhampton or Beckenham, and there's no balconies in it. It's The House Guest. It's set in New York, and it's about a young couple who go house sitting in Brooklyn. And on the at the start of the book, a young woman turns up during a storm and says that she's friends with the owners of the house, and that if she was ever in New York, she could come to stay. So this couple foolishly and naively let her in, and of course she turns out not to be, claims to be. And it then kind of goes off in what I think is a very unexpected direction. So I can't really say much more beyond that initial setup. But yeah, it was fun to write a book set that wasn't in the UK. So.
Well, both Vass and I have read your book. We were lucky enough to get a copy, and we both loved it. You know what? It's such a page turner. I can see why you sell millions of copies. I'm sure it's brilliant. No, it is. It's a wonderful book. So you've all signed to this new. Well, it's not new, but this imprint called Thomas and Mercer, which some of our readers may not have heard of. Can we explain, who they are and why you signed with them? Because they're a big force now, aren't they? They're a big new force.
Shall I go first? Because I'm the oldest Thomas and Mercer author here. I've been with them since the start.
You look the oldest as well. So.
Oh, I know, I do. God, I had beautiful hair at the start of lockdown. I don't know what happened.
You had great hair at the start of your writing career, more like.
Oh, God, well, that is true. That is true. So, yeah, 2013 is when I joined them, which is when they set up in the UK. I think they'd started in the US a couple of years before that. But Thomas and Mercer is basically owned by Amazon Publishing, and that they're the crime and thriller imprint of Amazon. And they're just like any other publisher, really. They acquire authors, they publish books. They mainly sell on the Kindle, but also we sell quite a lot of audiobooks and a fair number of print books as well. And they've built over the last few years a really great list. And actually quite a lot of the people that I've known, like Claire and Susi, and lots of others have come on board since I've been with them. And it's been really great to see them grow this British stable of crime authors. Because it started, when I started, it was just me and Mel Sherratt were the first British authors, and we had lots of Americans. And over the last, 7 years, since I've had 10 books out with them in those 7 years, plus 2 with Louise, so actually 12. They've built a really good list of authors and novels. And they sell lots. We sell lots.
Yes, we know.
Yeah.
So
I think, can I add, because I'm a kind of a new person, and I think when I think about Thomas and Mercer, one of the things that comes to my mind is it kind of is a bit of a mirror about the big changes that there have been in the publishing industry. So when I first came along, the only time people talked about digital kind of publishing was to talk about people self-publishing, and people did it in a very condescending manner as well. But I think with Thomas and Mercer, with that kind of Amazon digital platform, it really has shown that you can get readers through, and it's just shown how I think the publishing world is not just that traditional publishing world, and you think about paperbacks, you think about hardbacks, you think about going into bookshops. People's bookshops now are actually on their Kindle and other types of digital devices. And the idea that you can get a book, order it, and it comes straight to you so quickly, I think is one of the big draws with Thomas and Mercer. And I do think it's one of the reasons it has got such a huge readership, because people know they can get their books almost immediately. And then there's all that advertising. I just think the digital world is really fascinating, but it's very different from a bookshop world, I would say, as well.
So going on from that, so Claire, do you think, the reason that you've gone along with Thomas and Mercer, is this because you think that this traditional model of hardback and then paperback, which is still a mystery to a lot of authors, why we need hardback and then a paperback, because it splits your publicity. Do you think that model is slowly dying away? Is that one of the reasons why you thought to go with Thomas and Mercer?
There is a kind of strange polarization where you get some people get the hardbacks and the reviews and things like that, and events, posters, which I'm sure we'd all like to have as well, but you can't have everything. But maybe they aren't necessarily getting a lot of sales, even though they might seem like they have a high profile. And then you get all these authors that are publishing digitally, and they might be selling absolutely loads, but you won't necessarily have heard of them. So it is kind of splitting a little bit. And I did actually have a hardback with Thomas and Mercer with my first book, which was great. But I guess you kind of come to see that, like, as Dreda said, your bookshop is on your Kindle. That's a great way to put it. And there is this whole massively fertile digital world going on. So for me, it was just that I'd had a few hardbacks from my first books. And then we went to trade paperback, which for anyone that doesn't know that might be listening is those kind of the bigger paperbacks, which I've never really understood what those were for. And as I say, you split your publicity, you end up with kind of lots of massive books sitting around your house. So for me, it was like I really just wanted to get some sales and wanted to get my books into people's hands, and that has really worked really well for me. And I've been with Thomas and Mercer since last summer, and I've done 2 books already, so that's been really great for me. I also think the editorial process has been really great for me. Like standards are really high, and I've really enjoyed working with the editors there as well.
Well, can I just sort of pick up on that, and correct me if I'm wrong? It seems to me like, in that sort of online world, the Thomas and Mercer badge is almost a badge of quality. It differentiates you from, a lot of the self-published people that are online. Because as you say, they are like every other imprint, but they move a lot faster, and there's much more presence in the digital space. Is that right? Would you say?
No, I would say no. We self-publish as well, you see.
I see. Right.
And I think once again, it's this huge reflection of the changes in the publishing world, because what you have out there now, all these people who are freelancers. So we've got a fabulous editorial team in Thomas and Mercer, I think particularly with Jack, who we all work with. But out in the real world as well, you've got lots of freelance editors. And, I say to people, when they ask me about writing, I feel very differently about it now. When I joined it, I'm not sure how much of a writer's world I will say it is. Now, I think it's definitely a writer's world because there are so many different pathways. And on all those pathways, you have high quality. And of course, one of the highest qualities you will get will be at Thomas and Mercer.
So you think this is about empowerment for the author as much as anything?
Say that again, Abir, I didn't hear you.
This is almost empowerment
Yeah, I feel empowered. If you had met me, I think 4 years ago, I'm not someone who likes to moan, but I wouldn't have been as upbeat as I am today. And I feel incredibly upbeat because I can do lots of different things. Can you imagine, here you are as an author, you can publish with an established publisher like Thomas and Mercer, but you can also be doing other things as well. I know we'll talk about, different genres, but that's another thing. You can write in different genres. I just think it's an amazing time to be a writer.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think now is a kind of golden age for writers because there is so much opportunity. There's not just one way of doing things anymore where you've got to get past these. I hate to use the word gatekeepers, but I'm going to have to in this point. And yeah, there seem to be more readers than ever. Maybe I'm deluded, but that's what it feels like. There's all these opportunities. There's also, we're having a golden age in TV and film where the demand for content is absolutely huge. So more and more books are getting adapted, and it's a good time for screenwriters too. So you often hear doom and gloom around publishing and writing, but actually I think the last 10 years has been a great time to be a writer. And I know that for me personally, after spending 10, 20 years trying to kind of make it, the digital revolution is what's allowed me to be a full-time writer.
Fantastic. Shall we talk a bit about crime now? So, Susie, why crime fiction? Why aren't you writing romance or something else? Or science fiction or anything?
Probably anyone who's met me could answer that. I mean, I've always had quite a dark kind of, I was going to say personality, but that sounds wrong. I like horror films. I read horror books. That's always been my background, like from a young age. I found a big box of horror books in my mum's cupboard when I was about 10, and they were the ones with, like, there were these scary covers on them with slugs and stuff like that. And I started reading those when other people were still kind of reading nice children's books, and I think that might have damaged me somehow. However, it has been quite useful for my career as a crime writer, so it's just what I naturally fall into. Although weirdly, I do also, a bit like Claire, I like rom-coms and women's fiction as well, so it's I think that's a bit of a palate cleanser when I've got too dark with things, but yeah, it's my natural thing. Whenever I try to write something quite nice, someone normally dies, so
So do you and Claire both write rom-coms on the side under different names?
No, Claire does. I haven't yet, but I've got some ideas for some things that I want to work on, and that's part of the reason for me going to Thomas and Mercer as well, was that I'm hoping that by increasing sales, it gives me more time to work on more books, because I still have a full-time job as well. So that's kind of my reason for going there. So yeah, it all ties in, and it all ties in with being free to write what you want to, and not being pigeonholed into one little bucket anymore. So
now, Dreda, we're going to ask you that question because you were the first non-white winner of the CWA John Creasy Dagger, which is amazing. How did you get into crime fiction? Because it's a career path for those of us who are a whiter shade of pale, shall we say.
I didn't think I was writing crime fiction, you see. I kind of ended up there, and then when I realised what an amazing place it was, I decided I wasn't actually going to leave. So the book that I won the John Creasy Dagger Award for was called Running Hot. And I thought I was writing a redemptive book about a young black guy trying to get out of crime, and he's got 7 days to do something or it's kaput for him. And my publisher, because I was first of all published by a small independent press, we were talking to a well-known crime writer, and she said to us, "You do know that's a chase thriller, don't you? He's got 7 days, the clock is ticking." And she said, "You must submit it for the John Creasy Dagger Award," and we won. And then I started going to crime events, and what I found in the crime world was not only did I think the issues that I want to write about I can naturally do within crime fiction, the crime fiction world, in terms of writers, is a really supportive world. I cannot tell you how many people at the start of my career actually helped me, and they didn't have to do that. Whereas I think when you go to literary fiction, it's very competitive, and apparently romance, people are stabbing each other in the back.
In romance.
That sounds about right.
Maybe Claire can tell us a wee bit more about that later. But no, I would echo that. I mean, how have you all found the crime writing community? I know Susie's found it, as enjoyable as I have, because we're always at the same sort of festivals, propping up the same bars. So yeah, what's your
new friends you didn't know you needed?
That's true. That's true. And Dreda, you're absolutely right. Established authors, bestsellers will help you out.
I remember, I'll give you an example of this. I did my first convention. It was a Left Coast crime, as it was called then. And it was in Bristol. And I went. This was 2011 or so, maybe just before. And a very tall man came up to me and said, I've been hearing amazing things about your book Running Hot. And I said, oh, great. And, typical me, I didn't look at his name badge. And it's only when I saw him later on that I decided to look at his name badge. And of course, it's Lee Child that I've been talking to. And, Lee has been an absolute supporter since then, right to the point when he invited me and Tony over to New York. I've got lots of family there, but we spent a whole day with him and his wife. It's that supportive. Somebody at that level doesn't have to support somebody like me. But I find I'm in a world where people decide that they want to. And somebody said to me, they think it's because back in the day, crime writers used to get such a tough ride from the literary crowd. Oh, it's not proper fiction and stuff. So they kind of clubbed together, and anyone new coming in, we've got to help them to success.
I mean, the debate crops up every year with
I think
somebody making some stupid
personality of crime writers. I think we're just lovely people.
Yeah. Of course we are. We just like to kill people every now and then.
Claire, I mean, because you write different types of fiction. How did you get into crime, and how do you find it compared to the other genres that you write within?
Same thing, really. I grew up in Northern Ireland in the 80s and the 90s, so there was quite a lot of crime around. I think we were very sort of steeped in violence to the point where it became very normal to just live somewhere like that. And I grew up in a tiny little village. It was very pretty and very rural, but there were also armed soldiers on the street on quite a regular basis, and quite a few horrible incidents where people would get shot and blown up. So maybe it was that. I also read really precociously, like Susi. I was on the Stephen King from I was 9 or 10, and I think my mother had this idea that there was nothing corrupting in books. So I wasn't really allowed to watch Grange Hill at one point, for example, because of the teen pregnancy storyline, but absolutely fine to read Stephen King, Virginia Andrews, which is also pretty dodgy in a different way. And I wrote my first book when I was in my late 20s, and again, had no idea it was crime. It did have a murder in it, so I don't know what I thought it was, if not crime. It never really occurred to me. I think I thought I was writing the great literary novel, as most people do when they start out. And then when I realised that crime just gives you this massive architecture to your story, there's always something happening, which is the challenge, I think, in other types of books. And when I write, I was writing crime for a while, and then I had this idea for a rom-com, because I absolutely love rom-coms. If they're done well, I think they're amazing, but it's quite hard to pull them off. And that's when I started sort of writing these other types of books on the side. Well, started out with rom-coms, ended up with more uplit, which is that kind of genre where it's quite sad. And often someone does die. There's usually not a mystery about why they've died, and it's sort of uplifting at the end. But I really struggle with those because I always put too much plot in. So I'm always having to take out at least half the plot, because I've ended up accidentally writing a mystery anyway. And my new one of those books is about a couple that meet in a grief support group where both their partners have died. And there is basically a mystery in there as well. So everything ends up going towards crime for me. Absolutely.
What's that called? Because I love uplit.
It's going to be called The Heartbreak Club. It's not out yet.
Ooh. A great title.
It's set in Belfast, which I've never really read a kind of rom-com set there, so that's kind of interesting as well.
And do you write more than one book at a time, or are you writing sort of projects at different points, or how does it work for you?
Yeah, I wrote 3 books this year, in the past year. which I might try to do a little bit less going forward.
I think give the rest of us a chance as well, Claire.
Yeah, I think actually Thomas and Mercer, I was going to say this earlier, is a really good fit for someone that writes lots. I think we probably all of us do write quite a lot. I know, like, Susi is madly prolific as well. Has loads of different things on the go.
Well, you seem to have upset Marc, because he thought he was the most prolific till about 2 years ago.
I think he's just ahead of me on total books.
Barbara Cartland write a book a week or something ridiculous, but she ended up with 650 books, didn't she? So
Well, that's what I
Yeah,
need.
but they were always the same book.
Yeah.
I need someone to take dictation for me, so I can lie on a sofa and just dictate it like she
That's
did.
what she did. That's right. Yeah, she's
right.
lay on a sofa and dictated to her. I don't know why I know so much about Barbara Cartland.
I know.
I've never actually read one, but you know.
You've looked in her window enough times, mate, haven't you? Oh, yeah.
Butters or pantsers?
Oh, wait, no, we haven't had Marc yet. Marc, how did you write crime fiction?
Oh, well, it's the same answer as Claire and Susan.
The middle-aged white man. I mean, what is happening to society?
Oh, I know, it's all turned upside down, hasn't it?
Tell us about your journey.
It's the same answer as everyone else. I mean, I started out reading Stephen King and James Herbert, and books with deadly killer slugs on the cover.
Oh, I read that one, yeah.
That's not why you read James Herbert. That's not why you read James Herbert. I read James Herbert, and it wasn't for the rats.
Well, we read it, yeah, because I told you this last time we talked, didn't I? I used to take my copy of James Herbert books to the playground and read out the dirty bits.
Yeah. That's the only reason anybody read James Herbert.
That was in the days before the internet. That's how we used to get our kit.
And you just went to the playground and read it off your phone. That was it.
Oh dear. Yeah, and then I kind of wanted to write horror when I started out, but then I didn't actually want. I thought it was too easy having supernatural goings on, so I wanted to have a rational, real world explanation for all the stuff that's going on. So yeah, my books are crime. They're psychological thrillers, but they always have a little bit of a horror element in them. I'm trying to scare people and make them feel creeped out, and. Yeah, and I think that psychological thrillers and crime just give you the opportunity to write about pretty much anything that you want to. But within this, I've got this template in my head that every time I sit down to write a book, even if I wanted to write a rom-com, it would end up with I don't know, people being gaslighted and murdered and
yeah, mine do.
Do your partners ever think that you're weird because of the way you think and about how everything just turns out to be, oh, you could kill somebody in there? I mean, how do your other halves feel about your
Mine helps with research like that. He comes up with random things about, what about if you killed someone here? So yeah, we're on the same page.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only one that's speculated about how you would kill someone and get away with it. I think pushing down the stairs is probably the best way. It's probably not guaranteed.
It's got a cruise ship just pushing overboard.
Yeah, because there's very little investigation of those.
Absolutely.
I work in a crime and security. Sorry, I work in a crime and security research centre, so I could probably tell you the right answer. But
do tell us.
But you know, the upside of that is that my wife will never go on a cruise with me, so we're saving a bit of money. Dreda, what about you? Do you have other people think, well, you know, what is going through your head?
No, I'm very lucky. See, I write with my partner, so Tony's upstairs writing. He's locked in, actually. He does most of that.
There you
a Rumpelstiltskin situation. He's kind of spinning his gold. No, we've been writing for kind of years together, particularly from the 5th book. We've made it a bit more official. But I got published when I wasn't expecting to get published, and I didn't have a literary agent or anything like that. And I remember coming home, and I'd met my partner Tony at a creative writing course donkeys years ago, back in the early 90s in Goldsmiths College, part-time in the evening. And I remember coming in and I said, Tony, help, I've got to do this book, I've got a deadline. And what we used to do, we used to go out every Sunday to Stoke Newington, sit down, have a cup of coffee, and literally say, what happens next? What happens next? And actually that question is really good. So Tony's always been there. So it would actually be really odd for me to be living with someone who didn't help with my writing at all, or actually even odder if he didn't do most of the writing.
Brilliant. I love that.
And in return, you let him out of his room once a week.
Yeah, bread and water occasionally, you know.
It sounds like a thriller in itself.
Or a dungeon. Where is he? Upstairs or downstairs?
He's in the spare room.
So he's in the spare room upstairs.
You've pretty much told us about your process, Dreda. So what about the others? Are you mad plotters, or do you just like to go with the flow? Claire?
Yeah, so I actually taught creative writing for years as well, and I probably give my students really bad advice because I don't really know. I can't do the plotting. And I started writing scripts now as well. And in the world of scripts, you are expected to plan everything in quite meticulous detail, and I just can't do it. So I'm very much just start and see where we go. And I think that's fine. I've just learned to kind of trust that process, and it always turns out okay in the end. I would love to be the kind of person, I guess, that could figure it all out, but I would just get really bored, I think.
You could write scripts for Michael Bay. His Transformers movies, they have no plot. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I'm not sure you can say that.
Insert car chase here.
Explosion. Mark,
Yeah.
what's your writing process like?
It's chaotic. I mean, I can't plot either. I've tried, and I've got all the books on structure and saving cats and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I tried to read them, and then halfway through chapter 1, I think I just want to go off and do it. So,
Yeah, because it gets really boring otherwise for me anyway.
yeah, it's like I can't read instruction manuals, and it feels like an instruction manual for how to.
That's
Yeah.
because you're a man. You don't need instruction manuals. You're a man.
Well, true, yeah, a middle-aged white man to boot.
Ooh.
I know how to do this.
So I just write. I just start off and I just throw everything in that I can think of, and I end up with this kind of massive material, like twice as many characters as I need, and I kind of usually have a breakdown around an actual popping on the floor around the end of Act 2, to use the terminology. And then what I'm now doing is, so I've written like 80,000 words or something. I've got no idea how the book ends. It's a total mess. And I've now, over the last couple of weeks, I've sat down and kind of actually worked out the plot. And now I'm going back through and starting again and basically copying and pasting and rewriting and
How long would that take you? How long was that sort of double process?
About 6 months, 8 months.
Oh,
You
that's
write the first draft pretty fast, and then usually the second draft I kind of just go into the zone and do that as fast as I can as well. But you don't. It's about finding the story is kind of in there somewhere, but I never know what it is until I've written loads and loads of words. It's terribly inefficient, but that's how it works.
That's actually what Stephen King does too, though. So he says the story is in there somewhere, you dig it out.
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't though. I mean, I love Stephen King, but he does write like 8,000 page long books.
Yeah, so that's the second part, I guess, is the editing.
Yeah, the editors too afraid. He doesn't do the second bit of cutting out the dead wood. He just leaves in like hundreds of pages. Oh God, I probably shouldn't say this because he's.
your career.
I don't know. I don't know if you picked up. I don't know if I maybe misrepresented me and Tony. We're heavy plotters. We're real plotters. I think it comes a lot from me being a teacher in a past life. And, you know, thinking there's an inspector at the door, you've got to have your lesson plan kind of ready. We really plot so we know what happens at the start. We know what happens at the end, so we know what we're working towards. And we really do plot as much as we can because we think if we've got it down, when we come to actually write it, we just can get on with the writing. And sure, when you write...
thing. I wonder if that's like you have to, if you're co-writing. I don't know whether, Mark, when you wrote with Louise, whether you had to be more.
Well, no, a little bit more, but it was still kind of making up as it went along.
Still a lot of time on the floor.
What about you, Susie?
Yeah, I'm a plotter as well, but I kind of have to be because my day job is in a completely different field, and if I don't have an idea of what I'm going to write, I wouldn't write anything because I have to really slot it in. So I just find it easier if I've got a plan. So it might take me about 2 months to plot before I start writing anything, and then when I write, I'll write quite quickly. And also that means the first draft is usually in quite good shape, and I just go back and kind of second draft is more kind of like fleshing stuff out because I've got the main bones of the story down. I've tried to do it the other way, and I've got about 6 novels abandoned at 20,000 words of the ones where I thought I'll just see what happens.
Yeah.
Because then I get to that sticking point and I can't do it. And you know, when you've got limited time to do it, you have to be more efficient. So that just works for me now, and I'm hoping that I can keep doing that. But I mean, it doesn't get boring. I know you're saying, Claire, but because it does change when you write it as well. So it's not like you're fixed to the plan, but it's just giving you another point so that you're never having to sit down and stare at a screen when you haven't got much time and go, I have no idea what happens next.
I don't think it's a choice that people make. Am I going to be a plotter or a pantser? I think it's just that we just have different types of brains.
Yeah.
Some of us just can't.
Sorry, Mark. No.
Writing.
I'm like Susie. I like Susie.
Yeah. I'm not sure, you see. I think because we came from a kind of, you know, we've all done jobs in our life, and the idea that you would go to a job, you'd have your boss and say, well, I'm just thinking it through, you know, I'll get back to you in a couple. It just wouldn't work kind of like that for us. And I think a big thing for us, because we know so many people around us who don't have, you know, left education early on, who want to be writers. We're trying to demystify it for people. We don't want people to have this idea that you sit there and it all comes to you. We've got to wait for it to come to you, you know, as you're having a coffee in Soho or something. That it is a job, it has got structure, and you can get it done. And there are tools and strategies that you can use that get you from A to Z, and get you from A to Z in a particular period of time. And I think the other thing for me and Tony is, we've got it's a bit like you, Susie, we've got a whole other life out there. You know, we want to be doing all the other things we want to get on with our life. So it's important for us that our writing life is incredibly structured. Yeah.
Let's have a bit of fun. Tell us what you would be doing, your dream job, if you weren't a crime writer.
Oh, man.
God.
I was thinking about this the other day, actually, because you know, when you're at school and you get to this sort of time where they talk about what jobs you want to do, and they're absolutely rubbish. Like the guy that spoke to me when I was about 15, and when I said to him at that time I either wanted to be a scientist or a lawyer, he said, well, I don't know about that. Perhaps you should think about being a hairdresser.
Really?
I would love to be a hairdresser. I also quite like cutting people's hair, not very well, but anyway. But the point was, there wasn't really much scope for imagination of what kind of jobs. I mean, when I was at school, I didn't even know you could be a writer. I didn't think that was even a job. So anyway, what I would like to do is I'd love to work as a set designer or a location finder in films, because I just think
that's beautiful.
Yeah. But they need to tell kids you can do things like this, because how else do you know
you try explaining to Asian parents. Right?
Yeah, Irish Catholic parents also. Yeah.
Yeah, all these things. I'd like to.
They're the worst.
I'd like to be, I don't know if this is a job, so let me create it. I'd just like to be a professional talker. I just like to talk. I like to chat next to people in bus stops. I like to get up on the stage and have a good old chatter. I just like to talk. So whatever job there is where you have to do lots of talking, can somebody tell me about it?
You can do that, but first you have to become the British Prime Minister, and then, like Tony Blair, you can be paid £100,000 every time you get just to talk.
Or you need to start a podcast.
No, I don't want it to be that structured. It's funny because when I started broadcasting, because I have presented programs, and I found them really angst-ridden to present them, because all of a sudden I'm in a structure, I've got a script. Whereas if people ask me to come on a show, rock up and talk, yeah, I'm in, because I'm having a good old natter with you. So that's what I want, is a job where I can just natter about lots of different things in the world.
Unrestricted waffling. That's what you want to do.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
That's what we want. Mark.
Meth cook.
You need your hat. You need your hat now.
Oh, no. I would like to run a karaoke booth. Like a karaoke bar.
But you wouldn't let anyone else sing, Mark.
Well, so that's true.
You'd go out of business.
But I would have like a special guest spot every night where I would go on and impress everyone.
So after every night.
Yeah, after hours I'd have it all to myself. So karaoke is my favourite thing to do in the world. So yeah, that would be
totally banned forever now.
So what's your favourite karaoke tune? Yeah. What do you like to sing?
Oh, well, I've got like a huge repertoire of everything you can think of. The one that I always start with is Hound Dog by Elvis, but then I'll move on to like things like Gangster's Paradise by Coolio. And
As the alcohol flows. That's actually a good question. Let's ask the rest of you here. Let's go, Susie. What's your karaoke go-to song?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
You're alone now.
Usually wait till later on. Yeah, I think we're alone now. I wait till later on when those songs are kind of running a bit dry, and then I come up with the 80s tracks. So some old Madonna or
Holiday.
You were also a member of the Spice Girls. You're also a performer. You're a member of the Spice Girls.
Yes, although we haven't done anything for quite a long time. But
wow.
We are hoping we might come back next year. I don't know, but yeah.
Sorry, for those of us who don't know, what are the Slice Girls?
So this was a group of female crime authors who it started in bloody Scotland a few years back, and we basically sat on the bar in a very small pub and sang show tunes that involved murder. And, all dressed up in corsets with various whips and handcuffs and various tools, and it was quite a spectacle.
It was quite amazing, I have to say, because I was there, and it's one of those things you don't forget. You know how they say you always remember where you were when man landed on the moon or JFK. The equivalent for me, seeing the Spice Girls.
He was not only there, he took pictures, then he went to the school playground and he showed all his friends like Mark used to do.
Dreda, come on, what's your karaoke go-to?
Okay, and it's not because I've joined Thomas and Mercer. I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor. I love that tune, you know. Everyone, who doesn't know the words off by heart, you know? It's a real belter of a tune, and it just applies to so many different people. I love it, and I love that whole kind of disco era as well. Yeah. I Will Survive.
My favourite to do is I like doing Pump Up the Jam as well. That's a good one.
Yes, isn't it?
I can imagine you doing Sound of the Police as well. Do you remember that?
Of doing what?
Sound of the Police. Nobody remembers that?
Oh, yeah.
Start with the whoop whoop. Claire, what's your favourite?
Well, I always do Fernando by ABBA. I don't know why. I don't really have the vocal range for it, but it's always my go-to. And if we want to get other people up and singing, Tracks of My Tears is a really good one, actually. The people don't think they want to sing that, and then they do. They get really into it.
All right.
I have, like Mark, I have a whole series of them. I want to answer my dream job one, because I didn't answer that one. I always thought it'd be really fun to be a post person if I wasn't a writer. Because you'd get out and about, you'd see things, get ideas, get some exercise. People are usually happy to see you.
But it's generally quite early in the morning, isn't it?
That's the big downside. Yeah, I'd have to be like an
these days.
Evening person.
These days it's a wee bit late, isn't it?
Ours doesn't come till after lunch here, so yeah.
Has anybody written about a crime-solving post person?
Oh, great idea.
I don't think they have.
With the dog.
Sorry, we call it Sorry We Attack You.
You call it post-mortem.
Yes.
They seem to dress down a lot these days as well. I mean, our postie tends to wander around in shorts and all sorts.
Yeah.
You complain.
No decorum anymore.
Well, then maybe the post person should be the murderer, because they'd be the only link to all the different crime scenes. That's the one person that could go and no one would realise, no one would notice. Right.
Thomas and Mark, if you're listening, we are writing this as a group, okay?
Since we're talking favourites, guys, let's go back to crime. Your favourite ever crime novel?
I think Mark and I have the same one. We're like the same person, aren't we, Mark?
I know. Well, The Secret History.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it a crime? I mean, I guess it's a literary thriller.
I think it is. It's about murder, so.
Yeah.
Several murders.
Claiming it. So, tell our listeners a wee bit about it.
It kind of set the standard for sort of gilded group of young people at a very exclusive college in America, in Vermont. And they get sort of sucked into Greek mythology, and they do something terrible. And then to cover up the first terrible thing, they do an even more terrible thing. And it's just a really brilliant study of the group dynamics and people kind of slowly unraveling. And it's really beautifully written, as well as has a great story.
And really funny.
It's Donna Tartt, isn't it? Donna Tartt?
Yeah. And I just wish they would make a film of it. There's a sort of checkered reason of history why they've never made a film. I think it would work really well.
Because they've made a film of the goldfinch, haven't they?
Yeah.
And it's what do they have? Well,
there's something to do with this. Mark can tell you all about this, but there's something to do with them. The rights are kind of tied up or something like that.
Yeah, because Gwyneth Paltrow and her brother were going to make it at one point, and then it went into development hell, and I think it's one of those projects that's not going to come back now. And the Goldfinch movie didn't do particularly well, I don't think. So,
No.
yeah, I think that might have prompted them to make a film of The Secret History, but it's not going to happen, I'm sure. But that's, for me, that doesn't matter because the book is so perfect.
Yeah.
They could only ruin it.
That's true, yeah, because it's so dense, you wouldn't be able to get...
They should get Michael Bay to adapt it.
Bollywood version.
Transformers version of The Secret History.
We have a Bollywood version. You killed my
Bollywood version,
friend. I kill you, but first let's dance.
That'd be awesome.
Claire.
That's got somebody being pushed off of a high place as well, hasn't it? That's
Yes,
in that one. Well, one of the murders. So
Well,
we're both clearly influenced by that book.
Yeah, I guess so. I haven't done a college book. Actually, I kind of did a sort of Oxford book. There's loads of those around.
Yeah.
As well.
Susie, your favourite crime novel?
Mine's quite well known, Silence of the Lambs.
Oh, brilliant.
I just think it's one of those ones that even if you're not a crime fan, you can read it and it's like a classic, isn't it? It's just that whole dynamic relationship between between Hannibal Lecter and Clarice Starling. I think it's just...
Do you think the film is better, though, in that case?
I do think the film was better, yeah, and I think but I think the overall story, just the whole concept of Hannibal, I just really liked, and I think when I read it right in the beginning, and then read all the other ones, I just really loved the cannibal of.
I actually think
the character of Hannibal.
I actually think the book is slightly better, just because, I mean, the movie is obviously brilliant, and nobody can deny that, but the book was the original, so the movie had an incredibly brilliant book to adapt to. So any director worth anything was going to make a good movie out of it, especially when you've got Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster in it.
I don't know. I can see a version which was pretty terrible. You can imagine, can't you?
You've seen a version that
I can imagine one with like a very glamorous Clarice or something. And
It's not the first adaptation, is it?
Yeah, Mindhunter, the previous
and stuff, and Red Dragon. And did you like? So Susie, have you seen the series Hannibal?
No, I haven't, because I just
It's fantastic.
I don't want to taint it though, because I kind of got them in my head, and I think, I don't know, because even watching Red Dragon, actually, I think I saw Red Dragon before I saw Silence of the Lambs, and it just felt like a different character. So
yeah.
I think watching the series as well will also feel like a different character. I think I started to watch it and I thought, I'm not sure about the style.
Yeah. I think you almost have to think this is something else almost.
Yeah.
And then get into it. But it is brilliant once you get into it. It is amazing.
I've always thought it's a really crazy coincidence that somebody whose name is Hannibal turned out to be a cannibal. No, isn't it? It's like it was fated.
Amazing.
Parents named him.
Shall I say my book? Shall I say my book? And it's not a book. It's a play. I love, because I don't really read, if I can say this, I don't really read that much crime fiction. I watch a lot of crime on the telly, and I watch a lot of crime films. But the thing for me in terms of writing is Macbeth. I mean, Macbeth, murder, mayhem, betrayal. And, I had a real difficult time reading Shakespeare at school because I just didn't understand what anyone was talking about. But Macbeth, instant, connect. But I also think it's an instant connect because the power behind the throne is a woman, Lady Macbeth. She is ruthless. She is driven. She's not the type of woman you want to meet down a dark alley. And that's what I think is, all of a sudden, I think with crime novels, because lots of crime books are written by women, but I think all of a sudden the stories about women are kind of coming to the fore again. So I love Macbeth, and I love it because of Lady Macbeth.
Didn't Joe Nesbo write a version of Macbeth? Did Joe Nesbo write a Macbeth?
Oh, that rings a bell, yeah.
They're all over the world. I mean, there's a Bollywood version of Macbeth as well. And it's called Mukherjee.
What? I'm not sure what to make of that. There was a version, was it Oscar Wilde? No, it wasn't. It was somebody did a version of Macbeth and they moved it to Haiti.
Oh, wow. That would have been interesting.
This was back in the 50s and it was on Broadway. And I think it was the first all sort of African-American cast for a Broadway show. And it sold out. I think it was brilliant. And I think it toured the country. But yeah, I'd never heard of it. And it was but it was apparently amazing. And it's a good choice, I must say.
But the best version that I saw, and it was the one that I saw at school, was the one with Ian McKellen and Judi Dench. It's the one that's televised. I mean, and it's just black and white. It's just extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. So if you kind of find Shakespeare difficult in terms of going to see it, just watch that on the telly and you'll just be drawn in.
Well, you're a teacher, and a couple of my sisters are teachers. One's an English teacher, and they're constantly talking about changing the curriculum now for modern teenagers. But Macbeth is one of the things that most modern teenagers can still get their teeth into because it's so dark, and they seem to like Hunger Games, dark kind of scenarios these days. And I wasn't kidding. There is an Indian version of Macbeth, and it was incredibly well received in India. These things just seem to do well no matter where in the world you put them on.
Well, I think during the emergency in India, where democracy was put on hold in the 70s by Indira Gandhi, and there was censorship, somebody put on Macbeth, essentially highlighting her role as Lady Macbeth. It got through the censor, but it was like criticism of the government, and I think there's a lot of love for Macbeth. There's a lot of love for Shakespeare in India, but there's a specific amount of love for, or a special amount of love for Macbeth, I think. And it is linked partly to that sort of use of it during the Emergency Act.
We've got about 5 minutes left, guys. So shall we finish by asking you what you're working on next? What's the big, exciting thing that people have to look forward to? Claire?
Yeah, so I've just almost finished a book, which Jack will be pleased to hear. And it's about a young British nanny who goes to work in America about 20 years ago, and she gets accused of killing the family she works for, and she goes on death row. They actually have the death penalty in California, which it was something I wasn't aware of for a long time. And then she gets out on appeal, and then the present day story starts when she has once again been accused of murder, and she realizes she's being framed, so she thinks someone has worked out who she is.
Working title?
I Know You.
Cool.
I think that'll probably stick. I think that's quite a good sort of crimey title. I've been researching loads about death row and wrongful convictions, and it's been really, really quite depressing. There's a lot of them in America.
Heaps and heaps and heaps. There's so many. It's a scandal.
Terrible. It's really terrible. And it's really linked to race as well. It's quite shocking.
Susie?
So my next one is, after The Last Resort, it'll be out next summer. It's called Substitute, and it asks the question, if you could prevent the death of a loved one, who would you choose in their place?
Wow. That's great.
Yeah, so it's got a bit of it's kind of got a slight kind of, it's not supernatural, but there's kind of something a little bit otherworldly kind of dipped into it. But it's got people asking that question, because in it the person who's asked it actually gets a choice of 3 people to save and 3 people that they have to choose. So it's all about
high concept.
Who would you choose? Yeah.
Great concept. Mark, you like to carry on?
How do you as a writer even decide who to choose, who to save?
Well, I wouldn't like to say who's on my list.
Yeah, 6 of us, who you saving? It's been good knowing you, Vas. Dreda, tell us a wee bit about.
Yeah, so still working it through.
Tony's working on for you upstairs.
Yeah, he's upstairs. Yeah, and that's what I just had the dream. Yeah. What we're working on for the first book is about a young girl. She's of dual heritage, mixed race. Some people might use that term. And she didn't know who her family was. And we have I don't want to say what it is, but we have a particular device. But all of a sudden, it opens a gateway to her finding out who her family is. And she just wants to meet her mum. And she meets her mum, and she ends up in her mum's house. So she's always wanted to be on the inside. And it turns out she's in the most dangerous place she could be. And so we've titled it My Mother's House.
Ah,
brilliant.
That sounds brilliant. Mr. Edwards, tell us.
Oh, it's about a mild-mannered chemistry teacher who's
a mild-mannered karaoke van.
Yeah, who drives around in a karaoke van, murdering people with song. No, it's a novel set on a creepy campsite in Maine. So a guy a British guy goes on holiday there with his teenage daughter, and they find out as soon as they get there that 20 years ago there was a brutal double murder exactly where they're staying. And so this place has just reopened after 20 years, and all these dark tourists have gone to stay there, all these people who are obsessed with true crime. And of course, all this weird stuff and creepy stuff starts happening around the cabins where they're staying. And my main character starts to investigate what really happened 20 years ago, and it all connects up with what's going on now. It's kind of because I've set it in Maine, so it's a little bit like my tribute to Mr. King. Hopefully he's not going to send me a cease and desist letter. Get off my land kind of thing. You're not allowed to say any horror books in Maine. But yeah, and it's called The Hallows. Because
that's a lovely title.
Thank you.
No, it really resonates. Sounds really creepy.
Yeah, well, at the moment it's a mess, but it will be creepy when I finish it.
Right. Abir, you want to sign us out? Before you do, can I just say
thank you to our wonderful panelists, Dreda, Susi, Claire, Marc. It's been an absolute joy talking to you all. We should say thank you to Harrogate and to Thomas and Mercer as well. We've been the Red Hot Chili Writers. We hope you've enjoyed it. Vas, anything to say?
You've said everything that I would have said, but worse. But thank you.
My accent is better.
Thank you to all the listeners as well, and do check out the Red Hot Chili Writers podcast, because we've got lots of interviews with equally talented and brilliant crime authors on there for you to listen to. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. If you have enjoyed this event as part of the Harrogate International Festivals, please do think about a donation to ensure that our festivals can survive in the future. Donations can be made by texting HIF and the amount to 70085. For more events, please visit our online hub, the HIF Player. It's packed with upcoming live streams, events you've missed, archive recordings, and much more.
My name's Marc Edwards, and I write psychological thrillers for Thomas and Mercer. They're books in which scary things happen to ordinary people. I started out self-publishing in 2011, and then in 2013 I was signed to Thomas and Mercer, and now I've published 8 books with Thomas and Mercer, sold 2 million books and had 7 #1 bestsellers. The marketing support that I get from Amazon is fantastic, so whenever I have a new novel out, people know that it's out there and my readers can find it very easily. I constantly receive emails and messages from readers. They say really nice things. For example, they hadn't read a book for years, or they'd gone off reading and then they'd read one of my books and it had reinvigorated their love of reading. It's really nice to receive messages like that. Amazon are really great at consulting the author, letting me know what's going on, asking questions. It feels like a partnership. It feels like we're working together to further my career and sell as many books as possible. One of the most exciting things when Follow You Home, my 3rd book, hit the top 10 in the USA, and it sold 500,000 copies, and it was fantastic. It was a life-changing amount of books that were sold. Another highlight was when The Retreat hit #1 in the bestseller charts on its first day of release. Ever since I was a kid listening to the top 40, I've always wanted to be able to say that I'd gone straight in at #1, and I achieved it when that happened.